Let's create a process where we can do error handling and advanced logging. Click Create, and our flow will be an instant cloud flow. Error handling and advanced logging will, of course, work across all these flow types. We will give it a name. I'll call this calculation, and then I'll choose to manually trigger my flow. I'll click Create. This is the single most important Power Automate lesson. So I really hope that you will do this entire thing with me. Open up a flow and do all these actions and operations. You will learn 10 times faster than just passively watching. Anyway, let's design our process. The process today is not the important part. That is how we can handle errors in the process and how we do the logging. So we will make a simple process where we will initialize two variables and then add them together. We will find an initialize variable. Initialize variable. We will call this one a of the type integer, and we will give it the value 5. Let's also rename the activity. It's always best practice to rename the activities so we can easily see what's, especially when we have two similar activities, because now I'll choose to add another initialize variable. And instead of having them named one initialize variable and then two, then it's much nicer to do this, because then when I come back to this flow, or my colleague does, he or she can easily see what's going on, because now we can see that this is the initialized variable a and this is the b. So we also want to have a b integer here, and we'll 9. Now let's add them together. First, it will be a success, and then we will produce the error that we can handle. So we will have a compose. I'll rename this as well. So I'll call this compose calculation. I'll go into inputs. Now we will create an expression, a very simple one. So I'll use the add function, parentheses, start and end. Then we want to have the first number. That will be our variable a, and we can call that variable. Just start writing var. Then you can see the IntelliSense says, do you want to write variables? Yes, we will. I'll click the tab. It will automatically write the variables. Parentheses start, single quotation mark, and the variable name, which will be a. Remember, this is the variable name itself and not this title on the action. Then I'll have a comma, and similarly, I'll have the variables, parentheses start, single quotation mark, a. Here we are done with the expression. I always recommend you to Control A, Control C. That is because sometimes it will disappear these, and now you can see it even says that the expression is invalid. It is not. This is a bug in Power Automate. But when I click it the second time, it will add it. Sometimes it will disappear, and then it's nice to have it in our clipboard. Now let's try to save it. Let's try to test run it. Just so we can see that we can actually perform this calculation. And I'll click here. You can see down here that the output is 14. That is because 9 plus 5 is indeed. But what happened when I click edit here? I go into the variable b, and then we will have a string. So this is the error that we will look at today. But this could be any error, a SharePoint error, a database error, an API error, everything. Then our flow will fail, and it will stop right here. And this, in this way, we cannot create a log, because the flow will simply just stop at the error, and then it will not start again until a trigger will start it. So we miss out on creating a log or send a warning to the user that this flow failed. Let's try to solve for that. And let me just also go back here where you can see the 28-day run history. Here we have a succeeded and a failed. And of course you can go in here in your My Flows and inspect them, but it could be nicer if you had a dynamic log either sent to you or in a centralized place. We will create both today. So an email and a centralized log. Let me click edit again. The first thing we will do is to get a new step, because we want actions to be performed after our possible error, which were in the compose calculation. So here I will have another compose. I'll have compose. I'll call this compose status, and why I will get back to in 1 minute. So simply just rename it. Here, I want to grab what comes from here, and I'll go into an expression again. And right here, I can do an actions. This one will give us what we get out from the composed calculation if I specify the name. So in single quotation marks, I'll say compose, then an underscore, calculation. Again, Control A, Control C. It will say that there's an error, there's none, and now we have it. Then we want to, so now we have it, but if we ran this, it would stop here. We would not perform this and get whatever output is up here. So what we will do to continue after an error is to click these three dots, configure run after. Here we can see that the compose status should run after compose calculation is successful, but we also run it whenever it's failed. And let's take timeout. Is skipped is when it's skipped because of a condition. We will choose not to do it here. So I'll just click done. Now let's try to run it. The variable b is still a string, so this will be an error, and we can test that we're actually able to get the status out. Let's see. Here you can see that this was an error, but here we have a check mark, and that is because we configured the run after. Here in the output, you can see that the status is now failed, and we even have a message. So let me Control A, Control C this. And what I will do is to go to a JSON beautifier. I like JSON Crack. It's very visual, appealing, but you can use Code Beautify. Just Google JSON beautifier if you want another one than this. And go over here to the left. Control A, Control V. This is the output of our flow. So this is the JSON that Power Automate produces in their action. A JSON is simply just, you can see it that there's a curly bracket in the start and in the end. And then we have a lot of key value pairs, or maybe we have a name, compose calculation. This is the actual name of the action. And down here, we have a status called failed, and we have an error message. So, and the status, that is the key, and the failed is the message. So we can actually grab these things, and let me open up a notepad. I'll do this. So here I want to say get the status of the compose calculation, and then I will write the expression. So I knew that to get this here to the left, I wrote actions, parentheses start, single quotation marks, compose, and then an underscore calculation, like this. Then to move further down the tree, because I want to get the status first, then I'll have a question mark. Then I'll have hard brackets, and then I'll simply just write the name, the key that I want to get the value out for. So this one will be and the status. I can also show you the error message while we are here, because it's pretty much similar. So get the error message of the compose calculation. And this is of course only when there's an error, because I will show you what happens when we succeed. But for now, keep that in mind. So here I will say it's not the status that I want to look at anymore. I want to look at the error, and I want to look at the message. So I'll make another question mark, have these hard brackets, and then I want to say message and a hard bracket. I'll use the status at first, but we have now created it for the error message as well. I go back here and I'll click edit. So I could get the status out of this, go to expression, click OK, and it's not an error. I'll also try just to see what happens when this succeeds. If I can get a status out for that, hint, hint, we can. So now we click run, we click done. And if I go down to status, you can see that this succeeded. So it works both on the succeeded ones and messages. So what I want to do here is that what we have done here was to configure the run after. This was the important part of the error handling. So this compose status is just to get some status out of the current transaction and an error message. And what I also want to do is that I also want an error message, but actually when we run this and this succeed, this error message will not be present. And I can actually try to show you that. So if I click new step here, compose, and here Let us rename it so we can see what's going on. And here I will say error message. And let's first just write every output from up here again, like we did before. And then we could narrow it down, and we will even practice our JSON skills. This is a very key skill in Power Automate development. So what we wanted here was to write actions, and then we will have the compose calculation again. Again, you cannot write a space in these ones here, so you will have the underscore. You can, but it will produce an error. So this is just to get the entire thing out and just to show you that when it succeeds, we will not have a message. So right now we write everything out, but if I go down here, I can see the status is succeed and we have no error message. So we'll need to think about, of course, we will make this expression narrow, so we'll get the error message. We even have it down here. It looks like this. But so I go into the compose error message. I delete this, take the expression. Now we just need to think about one thing. We will only have an error message if this status up here is failed. So we want to do a condition. And a condition always asks a question. And here I can say that can be answered with true or false. And here I can say, is the status failed? If yes, then I want to compose an error message. Otherwise, I will not do it. Very simple. I'll click this plus here. And here I can actually see the condition first. If you don't see it, just search for condition. I'll just pick it here. But then I want to say, I want to look at the output from the compose status. So I find that in the dynamic content. That is why we renamed these. So instead of calling these compose 1 or 2 and so forth, we gave them names so we can easily identify me in the picker. And I want to say if this one is equal to failed, then if this is true, we're moving over here. And over here, this is when it's not true. That is when it succeeds or have another status message. Just move this error message in here. And now let us just talk about what will happen. If I run it now, since this will succeed, we should not get an error message. This will mean that this condition is false because it's not failed, and then we'll go over here and nothing further will happen. So I move in here, and here we can see the expression is false, and here it is next. That means that this was not performed. Similarly, I'll click edit. Let us just try to produce the error and see that we can actually get the error message over there. Then we have created our condition. Usually when you create these logs, or we want to send an email to the user first before we create an entire log, then you only want to do it when something erroneous happens. That is because when things go well, the user don't really want to know. And indeed, we get the error message over here. Now let's create a more detailed log, small log at first. We will expand it further during the video. So what I will do is, now click edit. Let me just collapse some of these things. So what do I want to include in the log message? We'll send an email to the user at first. We will just have the flow name. So we will create an expression that looks at this name up here, whether that is. And that is because we don't want to say there was an error in calculation, because this name can change. So we want our flow to grab it automatically. Let's do that first. So up here, we can start by grabbing the actual flow name. I click the plus. Again, I'll find a compose. Click the 3 dots and then click rename. And here I will say compose flow name. First, we will grab the entire information JSON about this flow, and then we will narrow it down just as we did before with the actual statuses. So I go here. And to look at the workflow properties at the runtime, we can just write workflow, and then it will write parentheses start and end. This is fine. Just click OK. OK. Click save. Now let's try to run it. And here we will look at the output from this, and we will try to see if we can narrow it down to just the flow name. We can use it. If I go in here, we can see that we have the output. Scroll a little bit down. We have tags the flow display name. Again, I really like to Control A, Control C. Copy it over here. So Control A, Control V. Let's create the expression for the flow name. So like this. And here I wanted to say workflow. This was to get everything, remember? And then I want to say, just as before, a question mark, a hard bracket, and you can even try to pause the video and do this yourself. If not, just write after me. So then I will have another question mark, and here I will have the flow display name. I'll do this. Let's see if this works. So I Control A, Control C, and I'll click Edit. I'll delete it up here. Go to the expression, Control V, and let's try to see if we can get the flow. So this is clever because if some other developer or ourselves rename this, we should be able to grab it dynamically. And we are. We can create our log. Click it. As we talked about, we only want to send an email to the user if we have an error here. I'll click Add an action. Here, I'll find send an email. Yeah. So who do I want to send it to? Let's just send it to myself. There's no reason to send it to another person right now because this is just in the. I choose myself. You can do this. Then I want to have a subject. I want to say your flow, and then I want to get the status. Right now, we of course know it's failed. That is whenever we are over here in the yes branch. But if we choose to move this, say to the bottom, so to send an email whether or not this flow has failed or not, then we can just grab this status dynamically. So I can say your flow, and then we can either have succeeded or failed. This is this variable that we produced right up here. Then we will have the actual log. And here I can have a flow name. And this is just hard coded in. I go to the dynamic content, and here we have it, compose flow name, the output from there. Similarly, I can have the status. I just find it over here. And now you can see it would have been a mess if we haven't renamed all these composers. We have several composers. So, and then I can have an error message. It's here. We could do all sorts of making this more beautiful, but just keep it simple and just like this. Now, let me save it and let us produce an error because otherwise we will not end over here. So let us be sure that this is indeed a string. It is. Let's try to send it, and I will run it now. It will run. In a few seconds, this has ran, and we have sent our email. If I go to my mailbox, and here I can open it, you can see that the flow name is calculation. That is fine. The status is indeed failed, and we have here saying that it's supposed to be a string. It's supposed to be an integer and not a string. So far, so good. But you can see that my flow ran successfully. And let me go back to the log again. You might want to, here we have a test fail. That was our second one where we failed. But now it actually succeeds, and that is because we handle the error. We don't stop the flow. You might want to say, now I sent the email. I then want to terminate the flow and set it to fail. What you'll do here is to go to condition, go down here, terminate, like this, and set the status to fail. Then you can save it, test it, and this is only in Power Automate that you set it to the fail, and it will stop right here. And then if I go back here, of course, it will send me another email now. Now it says the status is failed. But since what we're doing now is to create a log and error handling, and the log should be independent of this. So we don't have to go in here and watch these. Usually in my entire Power Automate setup, I will not have to go in here, both because it's quite complicated to log into Power Automate, go to my flows, inspect the log, and it disappears after 28 days. So what I want is to have a centralized log, and it really doesn't matter if it says fail or succeeded here. I will have to fail and succeed. That will be the status and the error message in my actual log. But this is the way to do it. We will go more advanced. We will try to introduce a try-catch finally. If you know programming, it comes from here. A try-catch finally. And let me just open up a notepad and explain it to you. So we have a try-catch finally. This is just the header. And what a try-catch finally is that it is a try, it is a catch, and it's finally here. So these are 3 containers. In the try container, you can call it the scope as well. Here we put our actions that we think can fail. In our case, that will be our calculation. Then we'll say, if this fails, we want to move into the catch. If it succeeds, we want to jump over the catch. So it's only when the try block fails, we want to move into the catch. And then in the finally, we will, whether or not the try has failed or whether or not it has succeeded, we want to go to the final. So the catch will only be performed if some things in the try block fails. This is somewhat integrated in a lot of programming languages. In Power Automate it's not, but we can create it very easily ourselves. So I'll go down here. Now I will hand this compose status, I will this configure run after. I will let my try catch finally handle this. So I'll just go here, configure run after, and only has the is successful from before. So, but we will create it like we did here. Then take a new step, find a compose, and we have it here. So we want a we want a scope. I just slept for a few seconds. Sorry about that. That happens sometimes when you looked at a compose, and I really hope you enjoy these videos with live coding, because I think you'll get all my thoughts in them and the knowledge that I have gathered. So try catch finally. We rename to this. The scope is ignored at runtime, and that is because we here we categorize things. This was our outer scope. Then we want, let me just again. So this was the outer scope, and then we want 3 scopes in it. These will all be childs. These will be nested under this, but they will not be nested under each other. So what I want to do first is inside here add action. Here I'll find a scope, and I will rename this to scope try. Now we want to add the catch. Here it's important that we do not nest it inside here, but we do it in the scope try catch finally. And again, these are just containers where we can sort our actions in, and we can do several actions in the scope. So here I'll have a scope catch. We'll have a scope finally. So again, we rename these to make it very easy to see where we actually is. So now we have the try catch finally. The catch, this is much like before, where we perform the status only when the previous action failed. Actually, we did it whether or not it failed, but now we will set this to 3 dots. Run. So scope catch should run after the scope try has failed, but not when it's successful, and then when it's... So only when something fails there, we want to run the catch. That could be send our email. Now I click done. Similarly, the finally, that will run because the try, when this succeeds, it will just jump over the catch and go down here. But we will run the finally, whatever happens up here, we will run the finally. Click the 3 dots, configure run after, click everything, and click done. So now we have made our try catch. We will save here. We will try to talk about what should go in here and what will go out. So first of all, we can start to move things, but because things are independent on each other. For example, this status is dependent on this up here. We can get a few errors when we move these things. The easiest thing would be to start from the button, but we will still have some errors here. That is because, let me just try to talk about what we want. So in the scope try, we will move in the calculation. And here we can see that the status is actually dependent on that. So let me just minimize it. So let us just try to move in the calculation. We can do this. We also want to say, where do I want to place my status? I want to have that one in the catch. It's very small now, but that's because I want to move the status into the catch and show you everything. And you can see that we cannot do this. This is because we have actions that is dependent on it, and this is here in the error message. So we will have to move the error message first and then the send an email. probably also delete this condition. So we also want to, and let me just zoom a little bit out, and here we just move things around. And this can, again, this is a little bit complicated because sometimes things are dependent on each other, so moving things is not allowed in Power Automate. I can see both good and bad things about this, because right now, if you know what you do, you want to be able to, but if you don't know what you do, this is a nice safety rail. Anyway, so if this goes wrong, we go into the catch. Then we want to get the status and the error message. And again, we cannot even drag the error message. So, and this is sometimes just trial and error, just see whenever it's dependent on each other. We could drag in the email. The terminate, let's just delete this because we will create a flow that will handle everything. I also want the error message in. But here, when I drag this one in here, I cannot drag it in front. I can drag it in here, but then it says this will fail. And that is because the email is dependent on it. So what I can do is to click these 3 dots here, copy to my clipboard. And then I can actually delete it up here. Now I have it in my clipboard. That is allowed. Then I go down to the catch. You can, of course, you could have created this from the scratch, but I think it's quite nice to see what you actually do when these things are dependent on each other. And here, I will just go to my clipboard and have the compose error message. Then I go into this catch again, and yeah, let me just zoom in. And here you can see that first is send an email and then the compose error message. I want to move the compose error message up here. That you cannot do, so you have to do it reverse just by moving it down here to change the order of this. So now we have these 2 things. We also have the condition up here. It's completely empty now. We have the output from the compose status. This, and I'll do this. Now we just need to move the status down here if that is allowed. Otherwise, we will have to do a workaround. We could do it. And I think I will move the error message just below here. So we get the status first and then the error message. I think that's the right order to do it, but this is just organizing. The final thing that we also want to do, because we also have the flow name here, is to go into the email and see that we have the flow name, status. That one works well, but the error message disappeared when we copied it to the clipboard. So we just need to add it again. And then we can click save. So let's talk about what will happen here. This catch will only be performed whenever we have an error in calculation. Let's try both runs, and here we can see that we actually get an error here on the variable b for some reason, but it will not fail whenever we run. So then I click here. We will run. And now we go into this try catch finally. Then you can see that this fails. And this, we knew that is because this variable b is a string, but it still went into the try catch and sent an email. And if I go over here, you can see that we now have it. So, and this is the exact same thing as before. Now let's try to just to make sure that we have everything right on this was here. And for some reason, you can see that and this is also a Power Automate bug. What you can do about this is sometimes just to refresh it. And again, you will get used to these things here, and then you can open it. It's just the way it is. But it's nice to see, you see all these workarounds with the tool, because otherwise, and then you know what to expect. This is not an error. This is not something that you have done. Anyway. I want to see that I'm able to jump over the catch, because then I have designed my try catch finally well. So now we did the try, but we jumped over the catch and we did the final. We have nothing in the finally, so that's it. So that is really nice. We have now produced a somewhat advanced logging feature, but we can do even better. We can also get the actual date of the flow, and we can get the URL. I think we will write it in the notepad, and we will write those 2 things, and then we will grab it here and use it in log. So again, we will build on the steps on this way. Yeah. So we can actually also have the flow date that will be here. and we can have the flow URL. This is when we send the email to the user. It could be nice, because then this one will not be open. It could be nice if the user could just click a link and be taken directly to this flow. So to get the flow name, we can get the current time by just writing UTC now, do like this. But we want to convert this from the UTC to another time zone, which in my case would be the Roman Standard Time. That is the Copenhagen time. Since I'm in Copenhagen, you should choose your time zone. But what you can do here is that you'll have a convert, and then you'll say from UTC, and then you'll have a parentheses start. So convert from UTC, and here it's important that we write it well. Sometimes, because this will be a rather long expression, I prefer to have it here instead of the expression editor. But this has the disadvantage that we do not have correction control of it, but we will cross that bridge when we get there. Then we want to say, what time zone do I want to convert this UTC to? That will be the Romance, and you can Google these time zone names. So Romance Standard Time, like this. And I think you should get your head around this, because handling dates is an important part of logging as well. So, and then I want to have the format. Let's just have it a readable format for our email. These are .NET custom date time format. We went through them a couple of times. You can just Google .NET custom date time format and take the first link. It's a Microsoft link. And then these Ds, they stand for something. The 4 small Ds, that will be the day in a small format like Wednesday. Then we will have the EMs, that will be the month, and then we will have days, and we will have the year, like this. Finally, we will have a parentheses end, because our expression ends here. So we will take the current time, convert it to our own time, and we will output it into the format. Then we want the URL. I created the expression for the URL for you, and this is on the course page. The link to this is in the description below. And here I want to scroll a little bit down and the hints. So to get the link URL to a Power Automate flow, I have created this one here. This is just for you to copy in. So I can go up in the right corner and click copy, or I can go in here and copy everything out. Let's first have it here. So you can see it's rather long, but it's basically just replicating what we have. So make Power Automate environments. Then we get the environments from the workflow. You saw that we got that before, and we get a lot of other. So let's start by the date. Control A, Control C, click edit. Up here in the flow name, I'll add in. So here I'll have another compose, and I'll call this compose date. Go in here, go to expression, simply just Control V in what we have just written. We have it here. We also want to get the URL to this flow, so we can use it in our log. So add in, compose, and URL and URL. Someone told me that whenever I say URL, you can only hear me say UL. So URL, sorry. English is only my second language. Anyway, I hope that this works for you. So now I have it in here, and I will here. So this is the concat function. Simply just takes a lot of elements and grab them together in string. Now, and while I just click save here, just so I have everything, we can expand our log. So I go down to the try catch, and again, we only want to so right now we only do logging when the flow fails, but in a little bit later in this video, we will make sure that we create a log whenever a flow went successfully, fails, and we will handle multiple transactions. So, but I go in here. Now we can add, we wanted the date and the URL. So maybe we want the date in the beginning. I simply just go in here, say date, and then probably need to untick the bold. And here we will find the actual date. That one is here. And we will also have a URL. And I think we will just have, you can have the URL wherever you want. Maybe we actually want it just below the flow name. So here I can say URL and find it over here. It's here. Again. Then we'll click save. Now we expanded our log. We provided more information. I really hope you try to just understand these expressions. And again, you can write like we did up with the flow name. You can simply just write workflow and then the parentheses start and end the end. And then you can see what properties we have. And it's simply just to grab the things from there like we did with the display name. Now let us see that we send a nice log whenever this flow fails. So I will test like this. So now it will take a few seconds. When our flow ran successfully. Let me get to my email and it's here. So here we can see that we have the date, we have the name, we have the URL, the status is failed, and we have the error message. And here you can see I have to work a little bit with the formatting. I accidentally made the error message bold and the date as well, but it's literally just minor things. And we also have the URL. When I click it here, you can see that I'm taking to the actual run of this flow. So here we can see that something went wrong. And with this with this one here, this URL, this makes it very easy for the user to inspect and see what went wrong. Then we can even make it even prettier if we want it. But and if you want to remove these bold things, we will just have to go in here and for some reason this one bold and this error message. Let's just not dwell into that. I really hope you get the point of this actual log, because now we will get really advanced. We will talk about, and let me just save it again. We will talk about how we can, because we got all this for this, the flow name, the date, the URL, we got the status and the error message. We will talk about how we can make a really, really advanced log when it comes to multiple transactions. So I prepared some data. Go over here in the advanced, click the download the Excel data for the lesson. Here I have the calculator. I'll first, let me just click download this. Let's move it to our desktop. I'll open to inspect it. It opens on the other screen. I can see I would just move it in here. So here I have some data, and you can see it's a table. First of all, the data from Power Automate needs to be formatted as a table so we can work with the Excel activities in Power Automate. You can always mark a range of data. So let's say that this was not formatted as a table. I can just mark this. And if I'm in the desktop Excel, I can just press Ctrl-T. That will format it as a table. It is now, so you don't have to do it. Or you can go over here to format the table. I also gave this table a name. So move inside anywhere in this table, go to table design, and up here you can see the table name is named calculation table. You feel free to rename it. The data itself, it's on the data sheet. Here we have some columns. We have the ID, that is a unique identifier. That is a great thing to have in your data. If we want to write things back, we can easily see that this is a unique number. This could be a record number in your product database. It could be an employee number, a social security number, whatever unique identifier. Then we have two numbers that we want to add to each other. So for here, and this could be transactions that we wanted to perform. Again, we made it simple. We want to add 8 plus 9. We want to write the result here. And we want a date, status, message. We could also add a URL if we wanted, but since it will be a little bit overkill because this URL will be all the same, then we might just want to update the URL in one of these fields if we wanted those. Let's leave that one out, but it will be straightforward to do. I also produce some errors because we want to test our flow, because we can, of course, we can add 8 plus 9, but we cannot add A plus 4 or C plus D or 0 plus F. So we want to create log messages. We want to say succeeded, succeeded, failed. And for the failed ones, we want to have the messages. For all of them, we want to have the date of the actual operation, and we want the result for when it goes right. Now let me close this. We need to place this data inside, for example, OneDrive, so Power Automate can grab it. What I will do here, that I go to I have a folder called live. Here I will simply just drag in my Excel book. You can place it wherever you want in OneDrive. It doesn't have to be in OneDrive Live, just anywhere there. Then we can grab it from Power Automate. So now we will not use the variables from our flow. Remember, we have made the A and B, but we will use the actual Excel values. So I go back here. So what I want to do is that I already in the edit. So now we will read the Excel book, and we will delete some of the things that we used here. For example, I will delete the initialize variable A here. I'll delete the B here. And I will delete actual email. I will not send an email this time, as we will log directly to our Excel book. This is the beauty of it. So now let's talk about what we want. I want to read all the Excel data first. So I go here, click the plus, and here I will find a list rows present. And let me just delete this bar down here so we have a little bit more space. So list rows present in a table. So what do I want to do here? I want to find the OneDrive for Business. That is where I have my OneDrive. Document library, that is OneDrive. The file, that one, I placed that on the live, remember? And you can do all these things with me, and I really hope you're still here. Otherwise, just rewind the video and do these things. I promise you, after this video, if you've done these things with me, you have. Then I find a table, which will be calculation table. So far, so good. So now we have read it. Then we can have an apply to each, because we want to iterate through each one of these values. And here we get an error. That is because we are using the variable A. We use that one down here in the calculation. First have add an action. So apply to each. And here we will choose the value from up here. Like this. And now we're iterating through each row one by one. We can start to actually just, instead of just having the variable before, like we had one transactions, now we have multiple ones. I just drag in this. So now I want to, for each one of these rows, I want to run the try catch finally. So here we want to fix a few things. I want to go in here and I want to fix the calculation first. Because now I can't add the two variables A and B. I will just add whatever is in the current row in the column A, B. Delete this. That will be the easiest thing. And here you can see that I can choose it dynamically, A, and this one will be the items and then the apply to each. That is the current row, and then the column A, and similar to B. I show you this because sometimes we can use a combination of expression and dynamic content. You will learn the most if you can write out these actual expressions. So again, let us just open up the notepad so you will have it. And I'll go down. If you want these expressions that we created here, if you haven't created, simply just send me an email or a message on LinkedIn. I will gladly send them to you. Anyway, so to add A and B in the multiple transaction exercise, we will need to actually, I think I will do this. So to get the A will be the items, and then we will have parentheses, and then we will have the apply to each, like this. And we'll do this just like before. When we want to go one below, I want to say I want to get the actual the A column, sorry, just do like this. So this one will get the actual A column. And then similarly, I can say I want to, since this comes from Excel, it looks like an actual number, but it's not. We need to convert it. Since we want this to work with decimals as well, we only have whole numbers in the actual sheet, but we could make it work with decimals. So then I can say a to a float. I just convert this to a float. Then I'll simply just say float. And I really hope you write these expressions with me. You will learn a lot. So now I have the a and then the a to a float. That is so we can add them to each other. And let me just make one more space here. Similarly, I can just say b. And I can just copy this one in here and simply just change this one to b. Then I can say b to a float. That is so, again, I can add a to b. And let's hope that this expression is right, that we don't have to, because we cannot validate it here in Notepad. Sorry, b here, like this. Now to add these two things to each other, and let me just add in space here. So then we'll simply just use the add like we're used to, and then we'll have the first number. That will be the a to a float, and here on the b, sorry, I'll need to delete this a and then have a b. I hope you're with me, and let me just do this. So here I will copy in the a to a float, paste it in here. Then I'll have a comma, and then I will have the float, and then I will have the actual b. So it will look like this here, and then I'll have a parentheses end. That will be the end, the starting parentheses up here from the add. Now I have added these two together. I go in here in the compose calculation, and now you can see for some reason there it was. Got it here. I'll click OK, and then we'll click we added. Now we don't use the variables a and b. Our flow will be ready to go, but we will also talk a little bit about the actual flow here, because since I'm going to write the log, and the log, let me just find it here. I placed it over here in the live. I want to update the log, but I also want to get the status when it succeeds. I want to have written in the succeeds here. That means that, let me just go here. That means that in the catch, I'll still have the error message here, but the status, I want to move that to the finally, because that's where I want to use it. Now, I can just update the Excel now. So I'm still in the apply to each, and you can see I'm in here. So in the finally, I'll click add an action. And this is the last part. This is how easy it is to write a log. We could have written a CSV or any other output that we can create in here. So here I will find my file again, and I placed mine on the live. But we could have created a separate log if we wanted. Then the table will be the calculation table. The key column and key value. Now you can see all the headers are here. The key column, that will be the ID. So we'll say, look in this one here. And then we need to map it. That is because we want to say which row do we want to update. And we already have an ID for each row that we're iterating through up here. I know it's the same one here. And then we just go into the key value. And then we have the list rows present in the table, ID. So now Power Automate know which row it should update. Then we can just say the result, that will be the calculation result here in the compose. That will be from here. We fix that. The date, well, these are just the same approach as we used before. Status, that will be here. And then the error message, if that is present, we will have it here. Again, you could do all sorts of other things, but what this has taught us, let me just go up here, is that we have a try catch. Finally, we try something, then we have the catch where we perform things that we only want to perform when it fails, and then we have a. So I'll click save, and it will be fun to watch if we have done everything completely right. Run the flow. And now we are updating our Excel sheet with the data, the dynamic log data. And here it will probably take like 15-20 seconds. And you can see that we still run. And if I go over here, you can see that now it will process the data. We have the result here for all the succeeds, and here of course it cannot do. Then we have the date. Again, this is Friday, November 18, 2022. We could have written this in a more Excel-friendly format, but for now it's perfectly fine. Then we have a status, succeeded, failed, 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 and we can see that we also have error messages from the failed ones. We need 3 transactions, so it still runs. Sometimes it can be a little bit slow. We just have to wait. We're waiting for the 2 times 8, and again, it's literally just to wait. Let us fast forward so you don't have to watch this. And it still runs. That is because it's the API to Microsoft is busy. It's not something that we have done. Of course, we will see this finish, so I'll just fast forward again. And again, it's literally just to wait. This is whenever, as I said, the Microsoft API is busy. It doesn't really make sense. We saw that it works, but for some reason now it came just as we talked. This is it. So we could, of course, create an even more extensive log that will also say that timeout after 5 minutes and then create a log entry. For now, this is fine. The next Power Automate lesson that you have to watch to learn everything about Power Automate is right up here.